My name is Caleb Black. I'm a Geomancer. Most people would call it a Feng Shui practice. My shop is more like a relic, a holdout in a forgotten alley in Philadelphia's old city, a place where the sign is peeling and the rent is cheap. No customers means no hassle. I'm good with that. My rules are simple. Rule 1, if you believe, you're welcome. If you don't, get the hell out. Rule 2, you want my help? My palm gets crossed with cash first. You always get these self-satisfied rich types, the ones who think every mystery in the universe can be solved with an algorithm. They think that right up until their multi-million-dollar mansion starts staging its own phantom opera at 3 a.m., or the files in their locked office decide to practice their aerodynamics. They storm in with a certified check and a face full of arrogance, calling me a purveyor of old-world superstition. I nod, take the check, and politely explain that some phenomena don't fall under the jurisdiction of science. They fall under mine. They scoff. Then, sooner or later, they come crawling back, begging me to save them. This world isn't haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by people who refuse to believe, and by the karmic debt they rack up in their ignorance. And me? I'm a guy who sends the invoice. My name is Caleb Black, and I'm in the business of balancing accounts. The shop is buried in the deepest lane of the historic district, the paint on the sign flaking off like sunburnt skin. I was kicked back in my rocking chair, listening to an old Gunsmoke radio drama on my phone and sipping a lukewarm coffee. Rent is $500 a month. I could go a whole month without a client and not starve. It's a peaceful life. The beaded curtain over the doorway was thrown aside, letting in a gust of wind and a woman in a tailored business suit, her face a mask of anxiety. She was flanked by 2 men in black suits who looked like they'd be more comfortable on a Secret Service detail. "Excuse me, are you Mr. Black?" the woman asked, her voice trembling. I didn't even open my eyes. "He's out. When will he be back?" "Depends on his mood." The woman grew more agitated, taking 2 steps forward. "Please, sir, our boss is in serious trouble. We need you to come see him." I casually tossed a stray coffee bean into the trash can before sitting up straight. "You know the rules of this establishment?" The woman froze for a second before the man next to her, her assistant, probably, hurriedly presented an envelope. "Yes, of course. This is the retainer. $10,000. I didn't take it. Not that rule. I pointed to a wooden plaque hanging on the wall. On it were 3 words. "Faith is the fee." The woman's face went pale. She clearly didn't get it. "Your boss," I asked, "does he believe in this sort of thing?" She fell silent. I knew who her boss was. Arthur Vance, the real estate mogul. You couldn't turn on a business channel without seeing his face, hailed as a visionary entrepreneur who championed science and logic, who had no time for pseudoscience. Just last week, he'd been quoted in a magazine calling people in my line of work clever charlatans. And now he was sending his people to me. If he's not a believer, then you're wasting your time. I leaned back again, waving a dismissive hand. "Have a nice day. Don't let the door hit you on the way out." "No, wait. Mr. Black." The woman was on the verge of tears. "My boss, he's not doing well. He's really not. Define not doing well. He keeps saying there's someone in his house. At night, he says someone whispers right next to his ear, singing, but he's the only one there. Security cameras? We checked. Nothing. We even brought in a psychiatrist who said he's perfectly sound of mind." I nodded. "Hallucinations, then?" "It's not hallucinations," she insisted, stamping her foot. "Last night, the books in his study flew off the shelves and arranged themselves into the word die. 3 security guards saw it happen. That piqued my interest. Tell him to come himself. Mr. Vance, he's afraid to leave his house. Then I can't help him." I closed my eyes, ready to get back to Marshall Dillon and the troubles in Dodge City. The woman didn't leave. She just stood there, wringing her hands. Finally, she grit her teeth, pulled out her phone, and made a call. "Mr. Vance, he won't come. He says you have to come in person." A torrent of enraged shouting erupted from the other end, so loud I could hear it from across the room. "Who the hell does this charlatan think he is? You tell him to get his ass over here right now, or I'll have that little shack of his condemned by morning." The woman held the phone, her face a portrait of mortification. I chuckled. "Hear that?" I said to her. "Tell your boss to keep yelling. Loud noises generate positive energy. Might scare the thing off." I picked up a small hand fan and waved it lazily. The other end of the line went silent. After a full minute, A voice, tight with suppressed fury, came through the phone. "What is it you want?" It was my non-believer client himself, Arthur Vance. "I don't want anything," I said. "I told you my rule. Faith is the fee. You don't believe in me, there's no point in me coming. It's a waste of everyone's time. Name your price." Vance's voice was ice cold. "How much to get you over here? This isn't about money." 100,000. I said nothing. 500,000. Still nothing. $1 million. Vance finally roared. 1 million, and you come right now? If you can fix this, the money is yours instantly. But if you're a fraud, if I'm a fraud, I cut him off. Not only will I give you the money back, but I'll get on my knees and beg for your forgiveness. How does that sound? Silence again. Fine. You bit out the word. I'll have my assistant text you the address. You have 1 hour. He hung up. The executive assistant looked at me, her expression a mix of awe and terror. "Mr. Black, you get the car ready." I stood up from the rocking chair, brushing some imaginary dust off my pants. $1 million for the chance to make him eat his words. Seemed like a fair deal. Besides, I was genuinely curious. What kind of entity could scare a die-hard materialist into this state? This whole thing had a very interesting smell to it. Half an hour later, I was standing in front of Arthur Vance's mansion in the Hollywood Hills. It was a sprawling, European-style villa with 2 stone gargoyles flanking the entrance. It screamed money. But the moment I stepped out of the car, I frowned. Something about this place was deeply wrong. The property was built halfway up the hill, backed by the mountain and overlooking the city. In theory, a prime location. The problem was, it was perfectly aligned with the gap between 2 taller high-rises in the distance. A classic sky-slit shot, like a blade slicing directly at the house. The 2 gargoyles at the gate. One had its eyes open, the other closed. A disruption of balance, an open invitation for unwelcome guests. In the driveway, it was a straight shot, aimed directly at the front door like an arrow. Piercing hard shot. I shook my head. This wasn't a luxury home. It was a spiritual black hole, a supersized combo meal of negative energy. The assistant led me inside. The living room was immense, gilded and gaudy, but it felt cold and empty, devoid of any human warmth. Arthur Vance was on the sofa, his face ashen, dark circles under his eyes. He looked nothing like the confident titan of industry on TV. Next to him sat a man with thin, gold-rimmed glasses, looking prim and academic. "You're the so-called Mr. Black?" Vance sized me up, his eyes dripping with skepticism. I nodded, found a chair, and sat down without being asked. "You're looking well, Mr. Vance," I said. A muscle in Vance's jaw twitched. "Cut the crap." He gestured to the man in glasses. "This is Professor Finch, a PhD in psychology and a friend of mine. I invited you here today as an experiment, so he can observe how you masters conduct your little scams." Professor Finch pushed his glasses up his nose, offering a polite but distant smile. "Mr. Black, I mean no offense, but from a scientific perspective, most so-called paranormal events can be attributed to psychological suggestion or environmental factors." I ignored him and got up, strolling around the living room. "Mr. Vance, who did the Feng Shui for this house?" "I don't believe in that nonsense," Vance said haughtily. "This was designed by the most famous architect in Italy. Every detail is an expression of perfection." Perfection. I walked over to a massive floor-to-ceiling window. "This is the primary wealth corner of your home, and you've installed a giant window. All your financial energy is flowing right out. We call this a wealth bleed." I then pointed to the bizarrely shaped crystal chandelier on the ceiling. "That light fixture has 9 arms, shaped like 9 daggers pointing downward. It's an amplifier for the piercing heart energy from your driveway. How can you feel at peace when you've got 9 blades aimed at you all day?" Finally, I stopped in the center of the room. "But the most fatal flaw is this." I stamped my foot on the marble floor. "Do you have any idea what's under the foundation of this house?" Vance frowned. "What are you talking about?" "The foundation is deep. It's solid rock." "Solid?" I gave a cold laugh. "You built your house on top of someone else's cemetery." As soon as the words were out, the air in the room seemed to freeze. Vance's face changed instantly. "What the hell are you talking about?" Professor Finch shot to his feet, his voice full of righteous indignation. "Mr. Black, please refrain from using such alarmist and unsubstantiated claims to create panic. That is a highly unprofessional tactic. I paid him no mind. I walked to a corner where a large porcelain vase held a bouquet of dried flowers. I moved the vase, revealing the floor beneath. I had one of the bodyguards bring me a crowbar and a sledgehammer. I pried up the marble tile. Underneath was concrete. I told him to keep smashing. Crack, crack. After a few hits, the concrete shattered, exposing the soil underneath. A wave of cold, musty air, mixed with the damp smell of earth, rushed out. The assistant and the bodyguards instinctively took a step back. Vance and Professor Finch drew closer, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. The soil was dark, almost black and damp. I reached in and felt around. Soon my fingers closed around something hard. I pulled it out. It was a fragment of a weathered tombstone. The engraving was faded, but you could still make out the name Zhang. The living room fell into a dead silence. Vance's lips started to tremble, his face now a shade whiter than before. Professor Finch's glasses nearly slid off his nose. He pointed at the stone, speechless. This is impossible. During construction, it was all clear. Vance stammered. Nothing's impossible. I tossed the tombstone fragment on the floor. You disrupted their peace. You built your palace on their final resting place. And you don't think they want to come up and have a little chat? I looked straight at Vance. The opera you've been hearing? That's them, singing you a lullaby. The books in your study? That was them, leaving you a message. As for the whispering in your ear, I paused and smiled. That's just them politely suggesting it's time for you to move out. Vance's legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the floor. Professor Finch was completely stunned. He leaned against the wall, staring at the piece of tombstone on the ground, his entire scientific worldview crumbling around him. Hallucinations. It must all be a hallucination, he muttered over and over. I had no time for him. I looked down at the heap that was Arthur Vance. So I asked, "Are you a believer now?" Vance's lips quivered, but he couldn't form a word. His assistant was quick on her feet, rushing over to help him up. "Mr. Black, please help him. Please save our boss. Save him." I laughed. How? By tearing down this mansion and giving the land back to its rightful owners? At that, Vance's head shot up, his eyes wide with terror. This mansion had cost him hundreds of millions. Tearing it down would be like tearing out his heart. "No, you can't." He grabbed my pant leg. "Mr. Black, name any price. Anything, just don't tear down the house. You see, it always comes back to money." I shook my head. "Mr. Vance, do you truly believe every problem in the world can be solved with a check?" Vance didn't answer, but his eyes said yes. "All right then," I nodded. "Today, I'll show you that some traps are built with money. And to escape them, you'll have to spend a whole lot more." I had him bring me the architectural blueprints and construction plans. Spread out on the table, it took me one glance to see the problem. The geological survey team and the construction crew were two different contractors, weren't they? I asked. Vance nodded. "The surveyor definitely told you there were issues with this land, that it wasn't suitable for a residential building." Vance's expression soured. Some old crackpot didn't mention something like that. I didn't believe him. I threw him off the property and docked half his pay. "Huh." I sneered. "You screw a man out of his living, you don't think he might screw you back? Your construction crew found something when they were digging the foundation. But they didn't tell you. Someone paid them off to bury it deeper, seal it with concrete, and then use the building's own structure to lock all the negative energy of this land right inside this house." I drew a circle on the blueprint with my finger. "See here, the shape of your swimming pool. Doesn't it look like the Chinese character for prison? And the rock garden in your backyard, the layout is completely chaotic. It's a classic 7 killings soul lock formation. Combine that with the house's inherent flaws, the sky slit, the piercing heart, the wealth bleed, you've got a full house of fatal errors." I looked up at Vance. "This was no accident, Mr. Vance. This was a deliberate, meticulously planned setup. Someone used money, modern architecture, and the science you so deeply trust to create a custom-made death trap for you. The goal wasn't just to spook you. It was to bankrupt you, ruin you, and ensure you and your family would never find peace in this life or the next." Vance was shaking uncontrollably, sweat soaking through his designer shirt. Who would do this to me? You'll have to ask yourself that." I stood up. "Whose career did you destroy? Whose business did you bankrupt? Whose life did you ruin? You know the answer better than I do. Vance slumped in his chair, his eyes vacant. Mr. Black, can it be fixed? He asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. It can, I said, but it's going to be difficult. And very, very expensive. How much? The person who set this trap spent a fortune. To break it, you'll have to spend an even bigger one. I held up 3 fingers. 30 million. Vance asked. I shook my head. 300 million. His voice cracked. I shook my head again. To break this curse, I want 3% of your company's stock. Vance shot to his feet, his face a mask of disbelief. 3% of his company was worth at least $3 billion. That's robbery. Correct, I admitted freely. You can call the police. Have them arrest this charlatan. Or you can continue living in your private cemetery, enjoying the nightly opera. I turned and walked toward the door. I'll give you 10 minutes to think it over. I reached the door and pulled it open. Mr. Black, Vance yelled from behind me. I'll do it. I smiled. Turning back, I saw Vance's eyes were bloodshot, but filled with the desperate relief of a man who had just stepped back from the abyss. I knew in that moment this arrogant real estate tycoon had just become my most devoted follower. Breaking the curse wasn't actually that hard. I had him bring in a crew, and one by one, we dismantled the traps. The pool was filled in and converted into a garden. The rock garden was demolished, the stones rearranged according to the 5 elements. The driveway was repaved into a gentle, embracing curve. As for the 2 gargoyles, I had Vance smash them to pieces himself with a sledgehammer, and the things buried beneath the house. I didn't have him dig them up. Exhuming them would only release more resentment. Let them be. I gave Vance a blessed sigil, had him burn it to ash, mix it with cement, and seal the hole for good. This is called suppression, I explained. Then I instructed him to throw the biggest, most extravagant party of the year and to invite every person of note in the city. A crowd brings positive, vibrant energy. It will help flush out the lingering negativity in this house. 3 days later, after all this was done, the strange occurrences in Arthur Vance's home stopped completely. When he delivered the stock transfer agreement to my little shop, he looked like a new man. He gave me a deep, respectful bow. Mr. Black, I will never forget that you saved my life. I accepted the documents and settled back into my rocking chair. Remember this, do more good in the world. Otherwise, all the money on earth won't be able to buy your life back a second time. Vance left, thanking me profusely. I glanced at the agreement, worth $3 billion, and felt nothing. I was just thinking, who was the person that set up this trap for Vance? His methods weren't those of a typical practitioner. They felt more like the work of a certain old friend I hadn't seen in a very long time. This wasn't over. After the Vance job, my rundown shop suddenly became a hot spot. I had told him to keep it quiet, but the city's elite circle is small. Word gets around. Suddenly, my little alley was lined with Bentleys and Rolls-Royces. My neighbors probably thought I'd opened a high-end car wash. The visitors were all wealthy, their problems a strange mix of greed and desperation. Mistresses wanting charms to secure their position, CEOs hoping to curse a competitor into bankruptcy, a whole clique of socialites wanted to know if their husbands were cheating. I turned them all away. My rule is to help the desperate, not the greedy. One afternoon, I was dozing in my rocking chair. The old fax machine in the corner, a relic left by my master, suddenly whirred to life with a series of screeching beeps. I'd forgotten the ancient thing even worked. Curiosity piqued, I walked over. A single sheet of paper slowly emerged. There were no words on it, only a drawing. It depicted a uniquely shaped skyscraper, tapering like a bamboo shoot, piercing the clouds. A bright red X was drawn over the building's peak. Nothing else. I stared at the drawing for a long time, a nagging sense of familiarity tickling my mind. Before I could place it, the shop door opened again. This time, it was a blond, blue-eyed man in a sharp suit, a professional-looking female translator at his side. Mr. Black? The foreigner asked politely, extending a hand. I ignored it and gestured for him to sit. The translator spoke up. Mr. Black, good afternoon. My name is Susan, and this is Mr. Smith. We're from a multinational corporation based in the United States. What's the problem? I asked. It's about our company's new Asian headquarters, the translator said. We've been experiencing some issues with the building. As she spoke, she pulled a folder of photographs from her briefcase. The pictures were of the same bamboo shoot skyscraper from the facts. Ever since we topped out the building last month, a series of strange incidents have occurred. First, 3 construction workers fell to their deaths from the rooftop. There was no storm, no equipment failure. The police ruled it an accident. Then, the lead project manager, one of our company's VPs, died of a sudden heart attack in his office. After that, our main servers crashed inexplicably in the middle of the night. All data was lost. Of the 2 engineers on duty, one had a complete psychotic break, and the other quit on the spot. Mr. Smith added a few words, and the translator continued. Mr. Smith says that morale is at an all-time low. No one dares to work overtime in the building anymore. Some have even reported seeing unclean things at night. I looked at the photos. In the sunlight, the building's glass curtain wall gleamed, a monument to modern architecture. But to my eyes, the entire structure reeked of death. Have you consulted anyone else? I asked. We have, the translator admitted with a weary smile. We hired the most famous shaman in the region, and even flew in a psychic from Europe. It was useless. The moment they entered the building, they complained of vertigo and nausea. None of them could last more than 10 minutes inside. So you came to me. Mr. Arthur Vance recommended you. That figured. What's your offer? Mr. Smith whispered to the translator. She held up 5 fingers. 5 million. I assumed she meant yuan. US dollars, she clarified. $5 million. A generous offer. But I shook my head. Not enough. Mr. Smith frowned. Mr. Black, that is a very competitive price, the translator said. You've had more than 4 deaths in that building, haven't you? I asked abruptly. The expressions on both their faces changed. From the day you broke ground until now, the number of workers who have died in accidents is in the double digits. Am I wrong? Mr. Smith stared at me, his eyes wide with shock. That information was a closely guarded secret within their company. How could you know that? How I know isn't important. I slapped the facts onto the table. What's important is that someone doesn't want you to finish this building. This came through 1 minute before you walked in. Coincidence. Mr. Smith picked up the paper, his face growing darker by the second. This is a warning to me, I said. And it's a warning to you. I'll take the job, but we're going to renegotiate the price. I don't want your money. I looked at Mr. Smith. I want your corporation to use every resource at its disposal to help me find someone. Who? A geomancer. One who has a fondness for building on land that should never be disturbed and for burying people where they don't belong. The image of Arthur Vance's death trap mansion flashed in my mind. The same methods, the same signature. I knew it. My old friend was at it again. This time, he'd taken his game international. 3 days later, I landed at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. A private car sent by Mr. Smith's company was waiting for me. As we drove through the city, a forest of skyscrapers rose around us. Finally, the car pulled up in front of the bamboo shoot tower. Seeing it in person was far more jarring than in the photographs, and far more malevolent. The building's entire form was like an unsheathed sword, radiating a chilling energy. Worse, it was situated directly across from the famous Petronas Towers. The Petronas Towers looked like 2 giant candles. This new building was like a knife plunged into the space between them. A candle and dagger formation, a harbinger of violence and disaster. I felt a crushing pressure before I even set foot inside. Mr. Smith and a middle-aged man of Chinese descent were waiting for me at the entrance. Mr. Black, this is the building's project manager, Mr. Lim. Mr. Lim, his face etched with worry, shook my hand. His palm was ice-cold. Master, thank God you're here. If this continues, the building will be a certifiable ghost tower. I nodded curtly and walked inside. The moment I entered the lobby, a wave of frigid air washed over me. It was noon and blazing hot outside, but the lobby felt like a walk-in freezer. The design was cavernous and stark, all black, white, and gray. It felt less like a corporate headquarters and more like a mausoleum. In the center stood a massive, twisted metal sculpture, like a cluster of tormented souls. This was designed by a famous artist. It's called Hope, Mr. Lim explained. Hope. I circled the sculpture. Despair seems more fitting. The sculpture was made of metal, an element associated with sharpness and aggression. Placed in the center of the lobby, directly facing the entrance, it acted as a barrier, deflecting any positive energy, financial or human, that tried to enter and metaphorically stabbing every visitor on their way in. Get rid of it. Melt it down, I said. Mr. Lim and Mr. Smith exchanged a nervous glance. Master, corporate headquarters spent a fortune on that piece. Then tear down corporate headquarters along with it, I snapped. They didn't argue further. I had them take me to the top floor. The elevator ascended rapidly. With each floor we passed, the oppressive feeling grew stronger. When the doors opened on the top floor, the sheer force of the negative energy almost made me gag. It was so thick it was practically tangible. The rooftop was still under construction, a skeleton of rebar and concrete. This was where the 3 workers had fallen from. I walked to the edge and looked down. The bustling city sprawled below, a river of traffic and life. But standing here felt like being on a cliff edge, with an invisible force trying to pull me over. It wasn't just psychological. The energy field here was actively messing with the mind. Those 3 workers, I asked Mr. Lim, did they act strangely before they fell? Mr. Lim thought for a moment. Other workers said the 3 of them were acting possessed that day. They didn't speak, just stared blankly at the ground below, and then they jumped together. They jumped? They didn't fall? Yes. Mr. Lim nodded grimly. I closed my eyes, sensing the flow of energy. The wind was strong, but it wasn't a natural wind. It was a Sha wind, artificially channeled and concentrated here. The building's design, every window, every air duct, had been subtly engineered to draw the most polluted, negative energy streams from across the city and funnel them to the rooftop. This place had become a repository for spiritual filth. Your vice president, what floor was his office on? The 88th. We descended to the 88th floor. The entire floor was a lavish executive suite. The VP's office was the corner unit with the best view, looking directly at the Petronas Towers. The moment I walked in, I saw it on his desk. A brass model, about a foot high, of an Egyptian pyramid. That was the VP's favorite piece. He bought it at an auction in Egypt, said Mr. Lim. I walked over and picked up the pyramid. It was cold and heavy. He's the first person I've met who likes to keep a tomb on his desk. I turned the pyramid over. On its base, I found a tiny, yet familiar symbol. A stylized character, painted in red, a command sigil. It was identical to the symbol I had found on the tombstone under Arthur Vance's house. My heart sank. It was him. Wrap this in a black cloth, take it out of here immediately, find a deserted place, and bury it, I ordered Mr. Lim, and notify everyone. As of this moment, all construction on this building stops. No one is to set foot inside again. Mr. Smith became frantic. Mr. Black, a single day of shutdown costs us an astronomical amount of money. If you don't want more people to die, you'll do as I say, I told him, looking him straight in the eye. Otherwise, the next one to go might be you. My voice was calm, but Mr. Smith shuddered. He saw something in my eyes he had never seen before. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. What's your plan? Mr. Smith asked me back in my hotel room. His attitude had shifted from skeptical curiosity to complete reliance. He set a trap, so I have to spring it, I said, spreading a large map of Kuala Lumpur on the table. This isn't just about one building. It's about the entire area. I circled several locations on the map with a red pen. Your building is the eye of the storm, the focal point, but its power is being supplied by these other places. I pointed to one circle. This area used to be a mass grave. Now it's a public park. I pointed to another. This is the city's largest slaughterhouse. And a third. And this is a psychiatric hospital. The resentful energy from the grave, the violent energy from the slaughterhouse, the tormented energy from the hospital, combined with all the natural negative currents of the city. This formation is channeling all of it directly into your skyscraper. Right now, your building is a powder keg, waiting for a spark. Mr. Smith listened, dumbfounded. So, what do we do? A head-on confrontation won't work. I shook my head. His formation is too old, too deep. Its foundations are solid. If I try to break it now, it would be like throwing an egg against a rock. So, we're not going to break it. I smiled. We're going to add more fuel to the fire. Mr. Smith looked confused. Feng Shui is all about balance. Since he's channeling all the filth to one spot, I'm going to give a push. I'm going to make the filth overflow, pushing it beyond the limits of his control. I need you to do a few things. First, go to the city's east side market. Buy the best quality cinnabar, ink lines, and peachwood blades you can find. Buy all of it. Second, go to the largest temple in the city. Ask the head monk for a consecrated artifact, a statue, a sutra, anything that has been blessed and holds power. Third, and most important, I look directly at Mr. Smith. I need you to leak to the press that your company is dismissing all the superstitious rumors. Not only will you not halt construction, but 3 days from now, at precisely 1:30 in the afternoon, you will hold a grand topping-out ceremony. Invite every media outlet and celebrity in the city. Mr. Smith was aghast. Mr. Black, you said no one should enter the building. You're sending them to their deaths. Don't worry, I said. No one will be harmed that day, because the real show won't be happening inside the building. It'll be happening outside. 3 days later, the area below the bamboo shoot tower was a circus. A sea of people, cameras, and news vans. Mr. Smith had followed my instructions, making the event a massive spectacle. I was in a temporary office nearby, watching on a security monitor. Everything seemed normal. I had calculated the timing carefully. 1:30 in the afternoon is when the sun's positive energy is at its absolute peak for the day. My opponent would never try to make a move then. He would wait for the precise moment that the peak began to wane, which would be exactly 1:29 p.m. I had Mr. Smith delay the start of the ceremony. At 1:25 p.m., I took Mr. Lim and a few brave workers, carrying the supplies I'd gathered, and slipped up to the rooftop via the fire escape. The wind on the roof was even more violent than before, whipping at our faces like razors. Master, what are we doing? Mr. Lim's voice trembled. We wait. I watched the sky. The sun was still bright, but I knew the flow of energy was about to shift. 1:29 p.m. I felt it. The very air around us began to change. A familiar, cold presence began to pour in from all directions. He was here. Now, I roared. The workers immediately followed my prior instructions, using the ink lines to snap out a giant bagua, an 8-sided diagram, on the concrete floor with powdered cinnabar. Mr. Lim placed the diamond sutra we had acquired from the temple in the very center of the diagram, and I, holding a peachwood blade, stood at the heart of the formation. By the sacred laws, I yelled, thrusting the blade toward the sky. In that instant, the bagua at my feet flashed with golden light. Simultaneously, the entire skyscraper seemed to shudder. Down below, at the ceremony, a freak gust of wind ripped through the crowd, toppling the stage and sending people screaming. I knew the battle had begun. My opponent clearly hadn't expected me to set up a counterformation on the roof. The negative energy he was channeling was now being blocked by my bagua array. 2 invisible forces were colliding violently above the city. I could feel the concrete beneath my feet beginning to crack. Mr. Lim and the workers had already scrambled for cover. The veins on the hand I held the peachwood blade withstood out like ropes. My opponent's power was even greater than I had imagined. He wasn't just channeling negative energy, he was leveraging the inherent aggressive energy of the building itself, its sword-like shape, to attack my formation. At this rate, my array wouldn't last long. It's not chaotic enough. I pulled out my phone and called Mr. Smith. The second thing I asked you to do. Did you do it? Igriegajis. Smith yelled over the commotion. Just as you instructed, we just announced our acquisition of that bankrupt steel mill on the west side of the city. Good. I hung up. The steel mill on the west side was an entity of the metal element, but one that was failed and decaying. It was the weakest point of metal energy in the entire region. Smith's corporation, a titan of industry, was also of the metal element, currently the strongest. By announcing the acquisition, the strong, vibrant metal energy of the corporation was now spiritually linked to the weak, decaying energy of the mill. The collision of these two opposing forces would throw the entire region's energy field into chaos. As expected, the moment I hung up, I felt my opponent's assault weaken. His formation relied on precision. With the entire board in turmoil, his ability to aim the negative energy was compromised. Never let a crisis go to waste. I bit the tip of my finger, smearing my blood onto the peachwood blade. By heaven and earth, grant me power. Break. With all my strength, I plunged the blood-soaked blade into the ancient Diamond Sutra. Boom! A silent explosion erupted in my mind. The entire rooftop was bathed in a soft, golden light. The oppressive, cold energy was vaporized by the light, vanishing in an instant. The wind died. The sun shone down again, warm and gentle. It was over. My legs went weak, and I nearly collapsed. Mr. Lim and the others rushed over to help me up. "Master, are you all right?" I waved him off, gasping for air. The fight had drained nearly all of my energy. But I had won. Not only did I break his formation, but I used the power of the Buddhist sutra to purify all the negative energy he had so painstakingly gathered. He had lost his queen and both rooks in a single move. I looked down at the crowd, which was slowly regaining its composure, and I smiled. I knew that somewhere, in some dark corner, he was watching me. Livid, the score was now settled. "My old friend, don't be impatient. Our game has only just begun." Coming back from Kuala Lumpur, I spent 3 straight days laid up in my shop. That spiritual battle, while invisible to the naked eye, had been incredibly dangerous and took a massive toll on me. I decided to take a long vacation, refusing all visitors, content to just sip coffee and listen to my old radio shows. One day, an old man dressed in a simple, traditional linen shirt walked into my shop. His hair was white, but his eyes were sharp and clear, and he leaned on a wooden walking stick. He didn't speak, just stood there, looking at me. I sat up from my rocking chair. This man had an aura. It wasn't negative or resentful. It was a very pure, though very faint, aura of the Taoist arts. "Can I help you?" I asked. The old man nodded, pulling a cloth-wrapped bundle from his coat. He unwrapped it layer by layer. Inside was an ancient-looking geomantic compass. It was made of wood, its edges worn smooth with time. The markings on its face faded. But when he placed it on the table in front of me, I felt it. The needle on the compass trembled slightly, then pointed directly at me. "Do you recognize this?" the old man asked, his voice raspy. I picked up the compass. The wood felt warm and smooth, a high-quality agarwood. On the back, a single, tiny character was carved. Xian. My master's Taoist name was Swan Kingzi. This compass belonged to my order. "Who are you?" I asked, looking at the old man. "I have come to repay a debt on behalf of your master." The old man said, 40 years ago, your master was traveling and came to our village. He helped us suppress a great evil and ensure the safety of our people. At that time, he made a pact with our village elder. He promised that in 40 years, he would send his disciple to return and resolve the threat for good. The 40-year period is about to end." I frowned. My master had never mentioned any of this. "My master has passed on," I said. "I know," the old man nodded. "That is why I came to find you." "How did you find me?" "This compass guides me to the one who holds its other half." From his coat, he produced another, identical compass. When he placed the 2 compasses together on the table, their needles spun wildly before locking onto each other, perfectly still. This was a mother-son compass, a sacred artifact of my order. The one I held was the son. The one he held was the mother. My master had left the mother compass in the village all those years ago as a sign of his promise. "How do I know I can trust you?" I was still skeptical. The old man didn't speak. He simply held out his left hand. His little finger was missing. "Your master said his disciple would understand when he saw this missing finger." My heart skipped a beat. My order has a tradition. Before a disciple can leave to practice on their own, they must pass 3 trials. One of those trials is to sever one's own finger, a sign of one's unwavering resolve. My master's left little finger was also missing. I understood. This old man was an apprentice of my master, or perhaps a guardian of his teachings that he had left behind in the village. "All right, I'll go with you." I stood up. "I will repay this debt for my master." This had nothing to do with money. This was a karmic thread left by the Swan Kingzi lineage. It had to be tied off. The old man's name was Elijah, and he was the village elder. I followed him on a 14-hour train ride, transferred to a long-haul bus, and finally hitched a ride on a rusty flatbed truck to reach his village. It was called Stillwater Creek. Nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains, it was almost completely cut off from the modern world. The moment we entered the village, I felt that something was wrong. The entire valley was shrouded in a thick fog, and though it was daytime, An unnatural gloom hung in the air. The houses were old, built of stone, many of them crumbling or collapsed. But the strangest thing was the silence. There were no birds chirping, no dogs barking, no human voices. "Where is everyone?" I asked Elijah. "They've all moved away," he sighed. "Things have gotten worse these past few years. The young ones left long ago. Only a few of us old bones are left to watch over our ancestors' land." He led me to a stone house that was still mostly intact. A few other elderly people were sitting inside. They stood up when we entered. Their faces were etched with a shared expression of despair and fear. "Is this him, the master's successor?" an old woman asked. Elijah nodded. "He's so young," another elder muttered, shaking his head. I ignored their chatter. I set down my bag and took out my own compass. The needle spun manically, unable to find its bearing. The magnetic field here, or rather, the spiritual field, was in complete chaos. 40 years ago, what exactly did my master suppress? I asked Elijah. A deep fear flickered in Elijah's eyes. "It wasn't a thing," he said. "It was the village itself. Or more accurately, the much larger village that lies beneath this one." He led me to the old meeting house at the back of the village. Half of it had collapsed, ancestral plaques scattered on the floor. In the very center of the floor was a deep well, covered by a heavy stone slab. 40 years ago, this is where your master set up his formation. He used half of his own life force to temporarily seal this well. "What's down there?" "Our ancestors' graves," Elijah said. "The people of Stillwater Creek have a tradition. When someone dies, we don't bury them in the earth. We commit them to the water. We lower them down through this well. Below us is a subterranean river. It flows into a vast cavern. The caskets of all our ancestors rest in that cavern." I took a sharp breath. Building a village directly on top of a centuries-old cemetery? What kind of logic was that? Our founders were soldiers who served a great general during the Civil War. When the general was betrayed and his family killed, our ancestors fled here with his only surviving son, seeking refuge and a new life in secret. To avoid discovery, they made this rule: the living reside above, the dead reside below. Life and death bound together. For a long time, there was peace. But then, things started to happen. First, livestock would die for no reason. Then people started contracting strange illnesses. At night, you could hear crying coming from the well. Then, 40 years ago, a black water started bubbling up from the well. A villager fell in by accident and was never seen again. We brought in all sorts of experts, but no one could help. Until your master arrived. He said the entire layout of our village formed a living tomb. Over the centuries, the negative energy, had accumulated to a terrifying degree. The ancestral graveyard below had become a nest. The so-called great evil was the physical manifestation of hundreds of years of concentrated negative energy. I finally understood. My master's solution back then was a bandage, not a cure. He used a formation to seal the well, temporarily separating the worlds of the living and the dead. But for 40 years, the negative energy below has only grown stronger. Now, the seal was about to break. Once that thing gets out, it wouldn't just be this village. The entire region for 100 miles would be in peril. "What's the situation now?" I asked. "Every night, we hear a knocking sound from the well," an old man said, his voice trembling. "One knock, then another, like someone is down there, trying to break the lid open. A few days ago, the Miller boy, the one who isn't right in the head, he wandered over here and put his ear to the stone. When we found him, he wasn't breathing. There was blood coming from his eyes, his nose, his ears, but he had a smile on his face." I walked to the well. The stone slab was made of basalt, covered in carved sigils. It was my master's work, but many of the sigils had grown dim and powerless. In the center of the slab, I saw a thin crack. A nearly invisible wisp of black energy was seeping out. I reached out, about to touch the crack. "Don't touch it," Elijah shouted. Too late. The moment my fingertip made contact with the black energy. Boom! My mind was flooded with horrific images. Struggling faces, twisted limbs, desperate screams, and a pair of enormous, blood-red eyes staring at me from the crushing darkness. I grunted, yanking my hand back. A black spot had appeared on my fingertip and was rapidly spreading. In energy poisoning. I immediately took a silver needle from my kit, pierced my own fingertip, and squeezed out several drops of black blood. Only then did the chilling sensation begin to recede. I stared at the crack, my expression grim. The thing below was far more powerful than I had anticipated. This was no simple evil spirit. This thing was on the verge of becoming a true Shah, a being of pure, destructive energy. We're out of time. I looked at the crack in the well cover. In 3 days at most, this seal will fail completely. The elders panicked. Master, what do we do? The only way is to go down there, find the core of the nest, and destroy it, I said. Go down the well. The color drained from everyone's faces. No, absolutely not. Elijah was the first to object. It's too dangerous down there. Even Master Swan Kingsley only dared to seal it. He never went down himself. That was then, this is now, I said. Back then, the water wasn't boiling yet, so a lid could hold it. Now, the pot is about to explode. You still want to just sit on the lid. If we don't put out the fire, we're all going up in flames together. The elders fell silent. They knew I was right. I'm going to need some things, I said to Elijah. Live roosters, over 5 pounds each, the more the better. The heartwood of a peach tree that's over 100 years old. Large quantities of cinnabar, blessed rice, and black dog's blood. And gather every able-bodied man in the surrounding villages. I need men with strong constitutions, positive life signs. Elijah and the others immediately set to work. Stillwater Creek may be a ghost town, but the surrounding communities were still alive. In 2 days, they had gathered everything I needed. On the morning of the 3rd day, before the sun had risen, the old meeting house was filled with people. Dozens of young, strong men stood ready, holding torches. Over 100 roosters were crowing in cages. I had changed into simple linen clothes, my hair tied back with a wooden pin. I had the villagers use ropes and pulleys to lift and move the massive stone slab, exposing the well's opening. A great plume of thick, black, foul-smelling air erupted from the mouth of the well. The flames of the torches nearby were instantly suppressed, shrinking to tiny sparks. Everyone recoiled in fear. Steel your nerves, I shouted, my voice infused with the power of my order's teachings. The men felt a jolt, and the fear in their hearts lessened. I walked to the edge of the well and looked down. It was pitch black, bottomless. I could only hear the faint sound of flowing water. I poured a bowl of black dog's blood into the abyss. Immediately, a shrill, inhuman screech echoed up from the depths. It's time. I tied a thick hemp rope around my waist, the other end held by the villagers. After I go down, no matter what you hear, do not stop what you're doing. Every 15 minutes, you will sacrifice a rooster and pour its blood down the well. Remember, the rooster must be alive, killed with a single cut to the throat, and the blood flow must be continuous. After giving my instructions, I took my peachwood blade, took a deep breath, and leaped into the well. The walls were slick with moss. The further down I went, the colder it became. It was a cold that seeped into your bones. After descending for about 100 feet, I dropped into water. The water was black and piercingly cold. The current was swift. I didn't hesitate, letting the current carry me forward. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened up. I had arrived in a gigantic, subterranean cavern. The ceiling was covered in stalactites of every shape and size. And floating in the center of the cavern were caskets. Hundreds, maybe thousands of them, packed together. Some were rotting, others were still intact. This was the nest of Stillwater Creek. The air was thick with a suffocating mixture of resentment and death energy. I noticed that all the coffins were oriented towards a stone platform in the deepest part of the cavern. That had to be the core of the nest. I began to swim toward the platform. The caskets in the water began to bob and rock uneasily. The lids of some coffins began to creak. I ignored them and swam faster. Just as I was about to reach the platform, with a great splash, the lid of the coffin nearest to me flew open. A bloated, pale thing sat up inside. It had no eyes, only 2 dark, empty sockets, which were staring straight at me. Then a second lid flew open, then a third. In a matter of seconds, dozens of coffins had opened. The water was now filled with standing people. They began to walk towards me, one slow step at a time. I tightened my grip on the peach wood blade. Just then, I heard the crow of a rooster from above. A stream of warm liquid, thick with positive energy, flowed down from the well and mixed into the water. Rooster's blood. The things that got too close to me were spattered with the blood. It was like acid on their skin. They hissed in pain, smoke rising from their bodies as they scrambled back. My chance. I seized the opportunity and scrambled onto the stone platform. On the platform was another casket. But this one was blood red, its surface covered in strange, writhing symbols. An evil energy, stronger than all the other resentment in the cavern combined, was radiating from this coffin. The great evil was inside. I raised the peachwood blade, and with all my strength, brought it down on the coffin lid. Bang! A deafening clang echoed through the cavern. The lid didn't even have a scratch on it. Instead, a powerful force rebounded, sending me flying backward into the water. I tasted blood in my throat and coughed up a mouthful. Before I could even get my footing, the lid of the red coffin began to open on its own. There was no body inside. There was only a throbbing, black heart. The surface of the heart was covered in veins, and with every beat, the resentful energy of the entire cavern pulsed in unison. This was the core of the nest. This was the great evil. The heart detected me and shot out several black tentacles, whipping towards me. I couldn't dodge in time. A tentacle wrapped around my ankle, dragging me under the water. This is it, I thought. Just as I thought I was about to die, the sun compass in my coat suddenly emitted a warm glow. The light shone on the tentacle, which immediately began to smoke and sizzle, retracting in pain. I broke free and scrambled back onto the platform. Of course, the Order's artifact was the key to fighting this thing, but the sun compass's power was too weak. It was for protection, not attack. What could I do? And then, I remembered Elijah's missing finger. I remembered the cruel tradition of my order. I finally understood. My master didn't leave this problem unsolved because he couldn't fix it. He was waiting for a successor with the resolve, the courage, and a willingness to pay the ultimate price. I looked at the black heart as it gathered its strength again, and a look of grim determination crossed my face. I raised my left hand, took my peachwood blade, aimed it at my own little finger, and brought it down with all my might. A searing pain shot up my arm. I let out a strangled grunt, beads of sweat rolling down my forehead. Blood gushed from the wound. I didn't try to stop the bleeding. Instead, I pressed my bleeding hand directly onto the blood-red coffin. My blood, infused with the vital essence of my lineage, was rapidly absorbed into the wood. The black heart began to beat erratically, letting out a series of ear-splitting shrieks. The entire cavern shook, stalactites raining down from the ceiling. The corpses in the water grew agitated, swarming toward the platform. But as soon as they got close, they were repelled by a golden light emanating from the coffin. The blood of my order, the artifact of my order, and the resolve of my sacrifice. This combination had finally awakened the power my master had left here 40 years ago. I felt a powerful, familiar energy flowing back into me from the coffin. It was my master's strength. Abomination, your time is over. I roared, my voice now carrying the weight and authority of my master himself. I took up the peachwood blade, now slick with my own blood, and lunged toward the black heart again. This time, there was no resistance. Squelch! The entire blade sank into the heart. An unearthly scream erupted from the core. It began to shrink rapidly, spewing black fluid everywhere. Its tentacles thrashed wildly before falling limp. The resentful energy that had filled the cavern for centuries dissipated like smoke in the wind. The animated corpses in the water collapsed, one by one, returning to their inert state. It was over. I collapsed onto the platform, too weak to even stand. Just then, an ancient, faint consciousness entered my mind. You finally came. I froze, looking around the empty cavern. Who's there? I am the first fuel for this nest. The voice was coming from the stone platform beneath me. I looked down and realized it wasn't a platform at all. It was a massive human skeleton. The skeleton was seated in a meditative position, its hands in a symbolic gesture. Its bones had a lustrous, jade-like quality. This was the skeleton of a powerful practitioner. Who are you? I am the first ancestor of Stillwater Creek. The general's soldier. I was stunned. When we brought the general's son here, I used all my life's energy to create this life and death formation to protect us. The living above, the dead below. The dead would protect the living, ensuring our descendants would prosper for 100 years. But I did not account for human greed. One of my descendants sought immortality through forbidden arts. He twisted my formation, changing it from Yin protecting Yang to Yang feeding Yin. He used the life force of the entire village to nourish his own soul. That heart was his corrupted soul. By the time I realized what he had done, it was too late. My own skeleton was used as the core of his new formation, a prison to hold me and a battery to fuel him. 40 years ago, your master came. He saw everything, but he knew the time was not right. To break the formation then would have allowed the evil soul to escape. So he only sealed the well, left the mother-son compass, and made a 40-year pact. He was waiting for the evil soul to absorb so much negative energy that it would become trapped by its own power. And he was waiting for a successor who could deliver the final blow on his behalf. It all made sense. This entire affair was a plan my master had set in motion 40 years ago. A staggering, long game that spanned decades. Master, I ask of you one last thing. The ancestors' consciousness was fading. Take my bones from this place, cremate them, and scatter them in the river. I do not wish to be trapped here any longer. I will, I nodded. I promise. Thank you. The presence was gone. I looked at the massive skeleton and gave it a deep, respectful bow. He was a hero, betrayed and used by his own descendant for centuries. The wheel of karma turns, and all debts are paid. I stood up and tugged on the rope. The men above immediately began to pull me up. When I emerged back into the sunlight, it felt like I had been reborn. Elijah and the villagers saw me and began to weep with relief. I told them what had happened in the well. They all fell silent. Then, one by one, they knelt before the open well and did not get up for a long time. They were atoning for the sins of their ancestor. 11. I handled the aftermath in Stillwater Creek cleanly. I had the villagers remove the corrupted ancestor's plaque from their history, his name to be forgotten forever. Then, I used a sacred fire to cremate the first ancestor's skeleton, scattering his ashes into the great river that flowed out of the mountains. When it was done, I felt as if a great weight had been lifted from my own shoulders. I had finally closed a major karmic loop for my master. I returned to my rundown shop. My severed finger had been reattached using an old technique, leaving only a faint, white scar. The scar was a permanent reminder of who I was. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. Arthur Vance sent me a collection of platinum credit cards and exclusive club memberships. I threw them out. Mr. Smith's company transferred the $5 million consulting fee to my account. I had it all donated to a foundation for underprivileged children in Appalachia. I have no need for such things. One day, I was studying an ancient text. My old fax machine screeched to life again. It walked over. A single sheet of paper slowly emerged. It contained only 3 words. You're next. The calligraphy was flamboyant, infused with a palpable evil. I looked at the paper and smiled. My old friend was finally tired of playing games and wanted to step onto the board himself. I filed the paper away and went back to my book. Let him come. I will be waiting. A few days later, an unexpected visitor arrived at my shop. Professor Miles Finch, the same psychologist who had lectured me about science at Arthur Vance's mansion. He looked much worse than the last time I'd seen him, haggard and aged, his hair now mostly gray. Mr. Black. The moment he entered, he gave me a deep bow. I need your help. You have to save me. I motioned for him to sit. What's wrong? My daughter. It's my daughter. Finch's voice shook. She's been taken in by a con man. Matters of the heart aren't my specialty. No, it's not a normal relationship. Finch insisted. The man, he's a practitioner, like you. He's put some kind of curse on her. My eyebrow arched. My daughter has always been such a good, sensible girl. But since she met this man, she's like a different person. She gave him all her savings. She even tricked me into giving her a large portion of my research grant money. I went to confront the man. He told me my daughter has a once-in-a-century pure Yin body, and that she was his cauldron, a tool to help him in his practice. I didn't believe him. I called him a fraud and threatened to call the police. And then Finch rolled up his sleeve. His arm was covered in a network of black, vein-like lines. He just looked at me, and this happened. He said it was a warning. If I interfere again, my daughter will die. What's this man's name? I asked. He calls himself the Architect. My blood ran cold. The Architect. My master had mentioned that name once, long ago. He said it was the title of the leader of a rival order, the sworn enemies of my own lineage. Centuries ago, the founder of their order and the founder of mine achieved enlightenment at the same time. But my order chose the righteous path to work in harmony with the natural order of things. The Architect's order chose the path of darkness, seeking to defy fate and bend reality to their will. The two orders had been at war for generations. In my master's time, he had defeated their orders so decisively that they vanished completely. I had assumed their lineage was broken. I was wrong. A remnant had survived, and by the sounds of it, a powerful one. The one who set the trap for Vance, the one who built the Death Tower in Kuala Lumpur, and now the one who had ensnared Finch's daughter. There was no doubt. It was him. This was his declaration of war. Where is he? I asked. He's here in the city, at a private estate on the outskirts of town. Take me there. I stood up and picked up the peachwood blade from my desk. I don't care who he is. He made the mistake of targeting people under my protection. Now, I was going to teach him a lesson. I, Caleb Black, am not my master. I'm far less reasonable. 12, the suburban estate. From the outside, it looked like a luxury resort, with manicured gardens and tranquil fountains. But the moment I got close, I could feel it. The entire property was enveloped in a massive, invisible formation. A wicked formation that used the life force of living beings as its power source. Professor Finch's daughter had to be inside. Wait here, I told the terrified professor. No matter what you see or hear, do not come inside. I walked alone toward the main gate. It was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The courtyard was deserted. In the center of the vast lawn, a single table was set with 2 chairs. A young man in a black silk suit sat there, calmly brewing tea. He was handsome, almost unnaturally so. When he saw me, he smiled. Caleb Black, I've been waiting for you. So this was the Architect. He looked to be in his late 20s, but his eyes held the ancient, predatory weariness of a creature that had lived for centuries. Let the girl go, I said, getting straight to the point. The girl, he feigned surprise. Oh, you mean the ink cauldron? Don't worry, she's perfectly fine. Just helping me with my cultivation. Once I've finished absorbing her essence, you can have what's left. He grinned. I said nothing, simply walking toward him. With every step I took, the grass beneath my feet withered and died. I was letting my aura flare. The smile on the Architect's face slowly vanished. He could feel the pressure. The air of Swan Kingsy. You have some skill after all, he said, standing up. But even your master was no match for me. What makes you think you are? My master merely drove you into hiding, I said. He was too compassionate. Me? I paused. I have a bad habit of pulling out the weeds by the root. The last word had barely left my lips when I moved. I shot toward him like an arrow loose from a bow. The tip of my peachwood blade was aimed directly between his eyes. The Architect snorted, making no move to dodge. He flicked his wrist, and a black paper fan appeared in his hand. He snapped it open, revealing a painted scene of 100 demons on parade. A wave of phantom wind gusted from the fan, deflecting my blade. A parlor trick, he sneered. With another flick of his wrist, the demonic figures on the fan came to life, leaping off the paper and clawing at me. I retreated, my left hand forming a seal as I chanted a warding mantra. Hold! A golden character materialized in the air before me, forming a shield that blocked the demonic assault. Interesting. The Architect's eyes lit up. It seems your master taught you his best tricks. Then allow me to show you the true power of my order. He snapped the fan shut and formed a complex seal with his hands. The entire formation around the estate roared to life. I felt torrents of resentful, deathly energy surging toward me from all directions like a tidal wave. This was the energy he had accumulated over the years, using living sacrifices. He intended to wear me down and kill me here. I couldn't let that happen. I closed my eyes, sending my consciousness deep into the earth. I had to find a formation's focal point. Soon I saw it. The core was in the basement of the main house. A young woman was tied to an altar, her life force fading. It was Finch's daughter. Surrounding her were over a dozen desiccated corpses. This monster. My eyes snapped open, and I could no longer contain my killing intent. I found you. I ignored the waves of negative energy crashing against me, focusing all of my power into the peachwood blade. The blade began to hum, glowing with a blinding golden light. Blade and soul as one. It was the ultimate technique of my order. A double-edged sword that could destroy any enemy, but at a great cost to the user. It was a last resort. But today, I had no other choice. My entire body dissolved into a streak of golden light, breaking through the storm of resentful energy and crashing directly into the main house. Boom! The reinforced concrete wall exploded inward. I materialized in the basement and, with a single slash, severed the ropes binding the girl to the altar. Then, I turned to face the stunned architect. Your formation is broken. His face twisted in rage. You would shatter your own spiritual foundation just to break my array? He could see it. Using that technique had cost me at least a decade of my cultivation. I told you, I said, wiping a trickle of blood from my lip. I like to pull out the weeds by the root. I advanced on him again, blade in hand. The architect felt true fear. He turned to run. Leaving so soon, I slammed my peachwood blade into the floor. By the power of 3 generations of my masters, I seal this space. The entire estate was instantly locked down by an invisible force. The architect slammed into the unseen barrier and was thrown back. His face was now a mask of pure terror. You can't kill me. If you do, the curse of my order will haunt you for eternity. A curse. I stood over him, looking down. I just gamble my own soul. You think I'm afraid of curse? I raised my hand. No technique. No magic. Just a simple, straightforward punch. It connected with the top of his skull. Thump. A dull, wet sound. And then the world was quiet. I picked up the unconscious girl and walked out of the estate. The sun was shining. Professor Finch ran to me, gathering his daughter in his arms, tears streaming down his face. I said nothing. I just turned and walked away. After that battle, it would take me a very long time to recover my strength. But I had no regrets. I returned to my little shop and collapsed into my old rocking chair. I picked up a book, brewed a pot of tea. A ray of sunlight slanted through the alley, warm and peaceful. I know there's still many dark corners in this world that I know nothing about, and many more people like the architect. But what does it matter? As long as Caleb Black is here, as long as this shop is still standing, the ghouls and monsters of this world can stay in the shadows where they belong.